The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we're coming to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. And contrary to popular belief, we're not doing Dr. Doreen this morning. That's just because we are so excited this morning because it's a great American shakeout. So we're going to have some gremlins this morning. We're going to shake some things out. We got a lot going on. And so I'm just preparing you because we're going to run through this opening a little bit faster this morning because at 10:20 our time this morning, which is just in like 19 minutes from now, we are going to participate here on the show in the Great American Shakeout. So know that that's coming. But anyway, we're coming to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. Thrilled to be here with you. We're going to be live for the next 2 hours talking about autism from a 360-degree perspective. Nothing's off the table here, right? Lots to talk about. The whole show is interactive. We want you to participate. Samantha is going to show you some of the different ways that you can participate with us while I remind you that our homepage is autism-live.com. When you go there, lots of things to do, but mainly there's a couple of things in particular we want to point out. If you click on the triangle that's on the computer screen, it will start the show playing. You'll either be watching the live show or the most recently recorded live show. Now, if you want to go back in time, click on the little memo icon in the upper left-hand corner. And I don't know my right from my left on most days, but the left-hand corner, there's a little memo tab. And if you click on that, then you can see the 100 most recent episodes. If you want to go further back in time, go to YouTube or go to iTunes or go to Roku or Stitcher. Really, we love YouTube. It's very user-friendly. Not that the other ones aren't. Don't write to me and tell me that those are user-friendly. It's really what your preference is, right? But in any case, it's all free on any of them. We put them on all those different sites because we know that you want to consume information in different ways and at different times of the day and in different, configurations in your car or when you're walking or when you're at home or on your iPad or, So that's why it is that way, so that everybody can have it their way, right? Now, also to the side of the computer screen is something we call the live feature. It's a series of white boxes. If you'll put your cursor in the one that says your questions, all you do is type, hit enter, and it shows up here on my screen, today on my phone, because we're having gremlins. And you and I can have a conversation, but better than that, you can have a conversation with our experts. I also like to remind you, and yes, I'm going fast because we have to get ready for the shakeout. We're all going to shake it. But anyway, I like to remind you at the start of the show that we have experts, and we have wonderful experts, and I'm thrilled with the experts that we have on the show today. But I'm not one of them, okay? I have a big vested interest in this community and this topic because I'm an autism mom, and I'll tell you something today, it's a little bit raw for me, and I don't even know if we're going to get a chance to talk about what happened to me yesterday at the dentist, which had me sobbing. All about this community. But in any case, I do care deeply about all of our kiddos because I have one of those kiddos. I have a 13-year-old who's on the spectrum and is the light of my life, and I remember what it was like on day one. We're going to talk a little bit about that later on with one of our guests, and how really hard it is in the beginning, and how it can become, if you don't get the right support, a personal crisis, and we don't want it to be that way. So that's why I want to be here, to help you get information and help you to get to the progress that we've seen to be as lucky as I have been in your own arena, in your own kind of luck, right? Okay, so because we're in a hurry, because it's the shakeout in just a few minutes, we want to get right to it. So we like to start every morning with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym, and we try to figure out what does it mean? Why do I need to know? Who cares? Right? But you find out when put in the right context, you find out exactly what it does mean and how it translates for you. So our jargon term for the day is telehealth. And we brought this up briefly yesterday, and we're going to be talking more about it in just a few minutes with my special guest. But let's take a look at what the actual definition, according to Wikipedia, is for telehealth. Telehealth involves the distribution of health-related services and information. Distribution is via electronic information and telecommunication technologies, and that is straight from Wikipedia, my friends. Okay, all right, but that's a little bit hard for me to get my head wrapped around. So let's move on to our working definition. And our working definition is utilizing technology to make some aspects of healthcare more practical, available, and affordable. So when you think about all the different ways that telehealth can be applied, it's mind-boggling, right? But let's not worry about every way that it can be applied. Let's just talk about some autism-specific ways that it can be applied. And when you think about the fact that if you have a kiddo, there are certain times when we want kiddos to get out and be in the world and do things. But there are times when, if we didn't have to, it would make it easier for them to accomplish the thing we're trying to accomplish. For instance, I was just at the dentist yesterday, and again, I'm not going to go into what made me cry yet. That I might have to save that for next week. But in any case, there are times when our kids need to have instruction on things like how to brush their teeth and how to floss, right? And the truth is that you can drag them all the way to the dentist and take them away from therapy that's important for them, to take them to learn this all important thing, right? We don't want their teeth to fall out of their head. It's important, right? But the 20 minutes that it takes you to get to the dentist, the 20 minutes you have to wait in the waiting room, the child gets anxious and there's sensory things going on there. By the time the child goes in to have that lesson about the brushing the teeth, maybe they're not in a place where they can learn it, right? This is not what's really productive. What if the child, who's very technology driven anyway, had the opportunity to do this online in an interactive way where they could see the person and the person could see them? What we find is that with a lot of kids on the autism spectrum, they would rather do it through an iPad and have a conversation with somebody through, for instance, Skype or something like that, where they could have the conversation back and forth and see each other. And so that maybe the hygienist can see and go, no, you need to move the dental floss this way, do it the way I'm showing you. And we find in some cases, not in all cases, that the child, this might be more conducive to them learning. But that's just one example, right? There's 1,000,008 examples of how telehealth can improve the way in which we deliver therapies and help and support to individuals with autism. And so we're going to be talking more about that specifically in a little while. But telehealth, if you remember that the whole point of it is that it's not going to work for everything. Let's just get that right out of the way. You're not going to be able to do everything that you could do face-to-face. You're not going to be able to do a prostate exam via telehealth. Right? You just can't do that. But whenever it's talky kind of stuff, you absolutely can. And there's a lot of talky stuff that happens in ABA and in autism treatment. So, and it's a lot less expensive and it's better for the environment if we do it via telehealth. So we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. But let's move on for the moment to the question of the day, because we got to hurry. We're on a timer here. Okay, so our question of the day today is, what would you change about your healthcare to make it more user-friendly? Now, you write in on Facebook, and I think that this is an important question from the woman who just went to the dentist yesterday. There are some things about our healthcare that aren't working, right? For each and every one of us. But if we can't figure out what would make it better, then how are we expecting politicians and other people to? So, you know what Dr. Phil says, you have to name it to claim it. So let's spark some ideas out there. What what would make it better for you? Um, and then we can discuss all that. It may not ever come to fruition, but if we don't know what we're going for, then how can we ever get it, right? Telehealth is now legal in a lot of places here in the United States, and it's something that makes a great deal of sense if used with common sense. Um, Again, no prostate exams through telehealth. That doesn't make sense, right? But there are a lot of things that do make sense. Okay, so write in and tell us because we want to know what you guys think about that. And then we want to move on to our topic of this show and of this week is nothing about us without us. That here's the humbling truth is that we can, as parents, and remember on this show we like to say that everybody is included in this community: parents, teachers, practitioners, and of course individuals who are on the spectrum. And a lot of times those of us who aren't on the spectrum, we plan and plot and come up with ways to help support individuals who are on the autism spectrum. And we need to constantly be checking in and see if what we're doing is helpful and useful and supportive. Because you know this in your life that, as whether you're a parent or a teacher, practitioner, or a person on the spectrum, you need support. You need support. I, as a parent of a child on the spectrum, need support. And sometimes people think they're being helpful and they're not. They're just not. And you kind of want to shake them. And I don't know about you, I don't want to be that to my son, and I don't want to be that to members of the community. So having said that, let's talk a little bit about who we're going to have on the show and what the schedule is. So at 10:20, and we're going to take a break here in just a minute. Then we're going to come back, and at 10:20, we're going to be live here on the show. My first guest up is Natalie Elo from CARD Telehealth. She's going to talk to us about what this new program at CARD is and how it can help those of you. We had somebody who wrote in from India yesterday. I hope you're watching, because we're going to talk in depth about what CARD Telehealth is. But at 10:20 precisely, Natalie and I are going to participate in the Great American Shakeout, and we're going to drop, cover, and what's the third one? Stay. That's not the word, but drop, cover, and hold, I think. For a few minutes, and we'll be talking to you throughout it, and giving hopefully some tips about things that we can be doing to prepare ourselves and our kiddos and adults that are on the spectrum for that kind of an emergency. And then a little bit later on in the then Natalie and I will talk more about CARD Telehealth. Then a little bit later in the show, at the 45-minute marker, we will have Special Attorney Bonnie Yates with us, and she's got some questions that she's going to answer for us from a legal perspective. And then in the second hour, we are going to welcome back to the show, we haven't had him on in a while, the great Alex Plank. Alex is a dear friend of mine. He's an adult filmmaker, a web designer. He is the genius behind wrongplanet.net. I think one of the most informative websites for adults talking about autism, that exists, and arguably probably the most well attended. He has great videos, and Alex is himself on the spectrum. He was diagnosed at 9, I believe, and he designed wrongplanet.net as a teenager because there was nothing for him, no place to go. And Alex, I do consider him a dear friend, and whenever I'm not sure if my opinion is right in terms of dealing with thoughts and feelings of somebody who's on the spectrum, Alex is the person that I call first. He's not the only person I call, but he's the person. So we're calling on Alex today to talk about the new mission statement for Autism Speaks. So I guarantee you, because Alex and I, there's no holds barred, and we don't always agree on everything. And we're like family, so we have agreed to disagree on some things and argue about other things. And I'm told that it's enjoyable to watch us discuss things. It isn't always enjoyable for us, but I guess it really is, because I always come back for more. So anyway, Alex will be with us. And of course, we have our mindfulness moment. So all of that is happening. We're going to take a short break here, get Natalie in here, and then get ready, because we're going to shake it.
Laura Kaczynski, the Pocket Occupational Therapist, and we're here in Dallas, Texas at the Future Horizons Autism Super Conference. So the book is the Special Needs School Survival Guide, and it's everything you wanted to know about school. It is, okay, so it starts out with just different diagnoses that you might see, and then I explain them in clear terms, no technical jargon, and then each little diagnosis area has about, I don't know, 50 to 100 activities that you can do at home or at school or cheaply and effectively. So it's just full of information that you can use right now. And the cool thing about it is at the end of every chapter are resources that you can use and access in the internet from a computer. And it's not just for kids with any diagnoses either. It's for kids that are just having trouble with handwriting or with dressing in school or transitions too. Well, both of my kids are on the autism spectrum, so it's important to me that when I learn something for other people, you know, as I research it for occupational therapy, I want to try it at home. So then I take what works and I put it in a book, and what doesn't work, it's thrown out the window. And the other thing is I've just started to research for webinars, because our kids, as you know, if our kids are aging, so they start out these cute little babies with autism, and now they're getting to be teenagers and young adults, and we need help with modifying the environment for them, transition planning, and especially for IEP goal writing, for functional things that they can work on, not just handwriting, but then going beyond into the transition to young adulthood. Yeah, the misnomer at this point in the school systems is that we just do handwriting. So we are actually not handwriting teachers. We can modify or help rectify a grip that's inefficient. So if a child doesn't have that nice, pretty little tripod grasp, we can help to get that. However, when the kid's in 2nd or 3rd grade, then we look at efficiency. So if the grasp is efficient, if it's a quadrupod grasp, or if it's some kind of funky grasp, and the child can write efficiently, then we leave it alone. But if not, then we go to electronic accommodations. So OTs then can look at keyboarding and what kinds of keyboards would fit the student best. Also sensory processing, as the kids get older, it looks different. So we can look at sensory processing as it relates to function in the school. And then we also can look at behavior and transition planning. Other things we can do is work on seating. So if the child's having trouble sitting still in the classroom, we can modify that too. So not just handwriting, not just sensory, but we look at behavior, transitions, so anything that affects that student's school day. Right, so that's a really good question, because sensory processing disorder did not make it into the last DSM, which is the way that medical professionals classify disorders. So it did make it into the classification under autism, but sensory processing disorder is very confusing, and a lot of therapists treat it differently. So the general overview is that sensory processing is either a heightened response to stimuli in the environment or a too low, which is hypo, response. So if the student perceives every noise around them is equally as important, or every feeling, so I'm sitting here, I can feel the chair, my sweater, the noise around me, then it's hard to concentrate and focus in the classroom on what you're supposed to be paying attention to. So we would use something, maybe a suggestion could be a weighted lap pad or some kind of fidget tool for the student to fidget with, or we can even look at special positioning in the classroom, so preferred seating. Then with sensory, transitions can be hard because any unexpected bump in the classroom or in line can set the child off into a fight or flight, which is when they really have a tantrum and freak out. So when they're in a fight or flight mode, they may fly off the handle for no apparent reason, maybe just being bumped by another student. So it's our job to be detectives and to figure out why the student nursed a way to control sounds that you normally couldn't control. So they're for sale at my website, thepocketot.com.
back, and we interrupted Kara Kaczynski to come back because, my friends, it is now 10:20 and it is time for the Great American Shakeout. So at this time, and by the way, this is Natalie Elo from Card Telehealth. She's joining us for the Great American Shakeout. So at this moment, we are pretending that there is an earthquake. And so we're going to get underneath the desk. How often do you see this? So come on, Natalie, let's get underneath the desk. And we're still tethered. But you know, the truth is if we were in an earthquake, we would be tethered.
All right.
So the first thing that you do is you drop, you cover, and it's important to get underneath whatever, cover your head, and then you stay until it's an all clear. And we like to do this on the show because I'm a big fan of rehearsing. I think that when your body knows how to do something, then you'll remember how to do it when in an emergency. It seems silly. We all feel like this is ridiculous, right? But worthwhile to do. When they were talking about it this morning on the news, my son immediately went over and crouched in the doorway and covered his head. He's like, look, I got it. I totally know how to do it. And we laugh about it, but it's worthwhile. Okay, we're going to say that we stayed as long as, and we got an all clear. I hope that you guys participated too. I want to remind you that this is the ideal time of year to check the smoke alarm batteries in your house, and hopefully you have one of the detectors. Of course, I'm having a senior moment now. That it's the
I don't know.
carbon monoxide. Thank
Yes.
you, Samantha, in my ear. Carbon monoxide monitor. Check that as well, and if it's a battery, check that. Usually we try to remember to do this when we change the clocks, but that's coming up in 2 weeks, so you might as well have a drill today in your home and check those batteries, because you'll never be sorry that you took the 5 minutes to do that, but you could be sorry if you don't. So, and our kiddos need that.
Absolutely. The extra practice goes a long way for them. It's a different situation, and they often aren't sure how to act in that extra anxiety, so those practice can mean a big world of difference to them as well.
Absolutely. And of course, I mentioned briefly before, and almost rudely, because it was so briefly, but we have Natalie Elo, who's with us. And this is not your first time on the show.
No, I was actually on a year ago.
And was it that long ago? I feel like
Yeah,
you
it
were on
was.
just recently too, no?
No, it was 1 year ago.
Okay, that's frightening to me how fast a year goes by. But you're here today to talk with us about Card Telehealth. This is a new arm of Card. And telehealth was our jargon term for the day today.
I saw that.
But we'd love to hear from you what telehealth is to you.
Yes, I'm so excited to be back. 1 year ago when I was on the show, I talked about us launching this service line. So it's great to come back to say that in the past year we've come so far. The telemedicine industry has really blown up in healthcare, and we are very excited to be joining the fight to bring services to individuals all around the world while reducing costs, which I know you mentioned. So currently, Card Telehealth is the next wave of trying to get top quality ABA services to everyone around the world. We have almost 100 offices currently domestically, but we still can't reach everyone within the United States. So this helps us get to everyone. And then of course in other countries around the world, this is the best way through internet communications where we can enter their home and help their families.
Wonderful, because we had a question that came in yesterday, and I said, tune in. I'm just going to briefly read part of the question that we mentioned yesterday, that it came to us from a mom in India. She says, I have a 13-year-old on the spectrum that she uses Skills, and that for 2 years she was using a consultant with Skills to work on things like sleep and other issues, and she says it was extremely helpful. She says, now I'm having a new anxiety from stimming issue going on during eating with my son, and I would like to have a professional help with this. Is that possible to have a consultant for this issue? How do I get started with this? And thank you so much. And I said yesterday, boy, how timely is that? Wait till you see who we're having on the show today. Make sure you tune in, because we're going to be talking about Card Telehealth. So how can this help her?
So I will say we absolutely can help. She mentioned skills. We are leveraging our existing resources. Skills is our online curriculum, and we also use the Institute of Behavioral Training, where all of our training resources are housed online, and we use those in combination with a board-certified behavior analyst to evaluate in the home through video communication, and then to provide the training, consultation, and ongoing support to address specific issues such as those mentioned.
And, you know, in terms of cost, I mean, because there is a cost
Yes.
associated with this, but it is wildly less expensive
Absolutely.
than other alternatives that you would have to have a professional helping you with this.
Absolutely.
So give us a feel for how that works.
So there's several ways we've drastically reduced the financial burden, like you mentioned. One is by eliminating travel cost.
Yeah.
So the time and the money that it took to get our professionals around the world was just more than most families could bear.
Yeah.
So by using internet communication, we have completely eliminated the need for travel cost. We also, through our training resources, are providing all of the direct training to locals on the ground. So whereas previously we would relocate therapists to other countries, now we're able to partner with parents, caregivers, teachers, and other young professionals who are interested in even starting their career. We are able to provide them with all of the top quality training and oversight that we are known for without ever having to send our own people out there. So we are now empowering locals in these other areas.
You know, it's remarkable to me because I have seen over the last, my son became a card client a little over 10 years ago. And in the last 10 years, as I saw what card services and the card program could do for my child, I would stay up at night and think, how can it be that I got this lucky, and why can't everybody be this lucky? And over the last 10 years, I've seen first, there was skills. So people who didn't have access to card could do skills, but it is and was really hard to go it completely alone. And when you get into a situation like this mom is talking about, where she knows, and we know sometimes you need to have a professional. There's some programs I can run as a parent, but there are other things where I need to have somebody consulting, telling me, tweak this, do that. This is what you have to do first, because I didn't get my BCBA.
Right.
I don't, I take my car to the mechanic because I didn't learn how to change the brakes. And my child is infinitely more important to me than my car. So there are times when we need to consult with a professional, and you've made that possible for everyone all around the world, that people can have this opportunity to work with a professional. The people that you guys have that are communicating through the telehealth, I know that you're one of the people, and you're a BCBA. Tell us a little bit about these people and what their experience is.
Yeah, so far, again, in the last year, this has been our big focus, and it's been wildly successful so far. We're working with funding agencies and things to make it possible for even more families. But currently we are still, so you used, at the top of the show, you talked about telehealth and how it involves all of those web communications, and that can only get us so far. As you mentioned, we're still not able to then go in and physically prompt the child if necessary and those things. So what we've done with our telehealth model is we are still hiring and training the direct staff on the ground and the parents and caregivers to actually interact physically with the child or the individual as needed. And then we're providing all of that qualified oversight by a board-certified behavior analyst via the telehealth services. And so that's provided via web communication, but we still have the direct staff to do the day-to-day, the really nitty-gritty work. We still have the on-ground support. So we feel it's a really great combination of that leveraging of technology with still providing that top-quality ABA that we've been known for the last 26 years.
Okay, so you're gonna train the parents and additional people that they have come in, whether they're volunteers or paid people. It could be, we've seen instances where people have taken volunteers from their church and said, we're going to train you in these things. So you guys oversee that with IBT, and
Absolutely.
But the person who's designing the program is going to consult with the family via that telehealth, and that's somebody who's got experience and has the ability to do that.
Exactly. Those those are all of our telehealth supervisors, our current CARD supervisors from our various offices around the country and around the world. And so they're the ones who have the experience with local supervision, and so they know how to make it work when they're over, miles and miles away over the webcam, and they can still speak to their staff on the ground or speak to the parents and guide them appropriately.
Okay. And so we talked quite a bit about this, but we haven't said how you connect. So and Samantha may have shown it on the screen already, but she'll do it for us again. Where do people need to go? And Samantha, go ahead and put it on the screen too.
Absolutely. So we have a couple different ways to reach us. You can find us on Card Telehealth on Facebook. You can go to our cardtelehealth.com website. You can go to the Center for Autism website, and right on the main screen there's a big image that you can click. You can also call the toll-free number that's associated with the Center for Autism and ask for telehealth services. Whatever works for you guys to get in contact with us.
Okay, so any one of those different ways.
Yes.
And then, is it a lengthy process before getting started? Is it, it takes
depends.
a little while?
There's, obviously our standard paperwork enrollment process that is involved, but we do, we are committed to getting to action as soon as possible. So we work with the family to get started, and it might be that we start with parent training and assessment while we look for local staff to train, or, we are willing to start with however we can to get you guys the help you need as soon as possible.
Okay. And you'll also help them to identify, what funding source they're going to figure out to do that.
Absolutely.
Because there are options, and so you're going to want to, you'll be able to have a conversation with them about that. But again, we need to say that it is so infinitely more affordable than how you would have had to have done it in the past. It's
Absolutely.
wildly more affordable. What am I forgetting? Because this is amazing.
I think you've covered it. Again, we're really excited to come back and share the updates and share that we actually have been doing what we said we were going to do a year ago, and we are just now, we're trying to get the word out that these services are available.
And keep in mind, we answered the question from the mom in India, and so wherever you are, we know we have a lot of viewers that are watching us in different countries. That's definitely I think one of the best options for you, unless money is not an issue for you. But keep in mind, those of you who are in the United States, who for the longest time have said, we've been saying to you, go to the CARD website, look at the locations. If you're within 30 to 50 miles of one, call them and see what the situation is. But you no longer have to be bound by that. This is something that you can participate in as well, CARD Telehealth.
Yes, you can still have a CARD therapist or a CARD team of therapists. You can still get now everything that we're doing locally. You can get that same intervention, that same treatment program, and that same success.
Okay, so CARD Telehealth, it's one of the newest and I think brightest things going on. So thank you so much for being here with us again, and you'll come back and give us more updates, and maybe if we have more questions that come in about that, then we'll have you back again.
Absolutely.
But thank you, and thank everybody on your team. This honestly is like a dream for me, that as we get to more and more families, that we can say, yes, we have something for you. That helps me to sleep, so thank you. All right, we are going to take a short break, and then in just a little while, we have coming up legal support with Bonnie Yates. She's a special education attorney and going to be answering your questions live here on the show. Stick with us.
Potty training is different for every child. A child could come in with absolutely, no control over their bladder, and as long as that's not a medical issue, then we can certainly approach it behaviorally and give them the tools they need to be successful, just like any other skill that we would teach.
Well, we think he's learning to pee on the potty. No big successes yet, and lots of accidents. Here is the laundry from today.
For some of our kids, takes, just a couple days. And then for other kids, it can take months and months and months. And then when you're looking at complete independence, it can take years.
Hey, you have to go pee-pee?
There's a lot of different ways to tell if a child is ready. We look for a couple different things. Probably the most important is parents saying, I need this to happen, I'm ready. Second is, a child showing interest in the bathroom, and some of it is simply age. It's time to go ahead and work on this.
What are you doing? Pooping. You're pooping?
you first start with teaching the child what they need to do on the toilet. The basic thing we want is for them to drink as much liquid as possible. It's inevitable that if you drink a bunch of liquid, you're gonna pee.
No, I can't help you pee. I can hold your hand, but I can't help you pee.
Ultimately, what we want is that, the child, as soon as they're put on the toilet, they urinate. So that's step one. Step two is usually working through the amount of time that they're off of the toilet and making sure that they're not having accidents during the time that they're off. So this is kind of the bladder control stage of things.
So the purpose of the potty log is just to see how long it takes them as soon as they sit on the potty for them to actually urinate, and the amount of time that he's able to hold his urine. And with the log, we're able to visually see how long it takes them each time, and if they have accidents or not. He's on a half-hour potty schedule, so if he doesn't go when we take him, then we have to take him in 10 more minutes. So every 10-minute intervals until he does go, and then we reset the clock, and it's 30 minutes again.
Okay, buddy. Okay, last chance to go pee-pees. Do we reset it for 10?
Oh, what does that mean? What does that mean, Jack? It's potty time. We can come play after. Hurry.
What we hope happens in this time is that the kids will learn how to initiate going to the bathroom on their own. This is oftentimes the hardest part of potty training, is because they get so used to somebody telling them when they need to go that they're not really recognizing the signs just in their own body of when they need to go.
Uh-oh, he wet himself.
Big wet?
Was it a lot? We can reset to half an hour now.
The biggest thing for parents is not to give up. The other big tip, and I think pitfall that a lot of parents fall into, is putting their children back into pull-ups or diapers, especially if they're starting to have accidents. And this is probably the worst thing that you can do. They need to recognize that feeling of fullness in their bladder and take themselves to the bathroom, or tell an adult that they need to go to the bathroom.
What do you have to do? You have to put your pee-pee in the potty. Okay, give it a shot. See if you can put it in there. There you go. You're doing it. Yay, Jack. Big prayer for your pee-pee.
Big pee-pees.
Yay! Woo! Yay! Good job. What a big boy. High five, high five, high five, high five, high five, high five, high five.
One of the things that I love about working here and being around people who work with kids who are on the spectrum is that they openly acknowledge that the potty training thing is no big deal. Like, to all of us, it's huge. And if you don't have potty training in place, it's like, it's huge. There's a shame factor as your child gets older. It's overwhelming, it's expensive, it's messy. And there's a feeling of being stuck, and that your child is not going to progress or be able to do all the things that you hoped that they were going to be able to do because you're stuck at potty training. And I know people who have I'm trying to think if I still know people that have adult children. I don't think I know anybody anymore who has an adult child who is in diapers. But early on, I knew tons of people, and it was frightening to me for them, and thinking, oh no, what if that, there was a time when I was like, oh, is that going to be us? And when I look back and then I think, wow, I mean, how amazing, because it's so clear that we were not going to be stuck there. And that is exactly how the people on our team responded. They were like, oh yeah, no, the body training, that's going to, we're going to get that done in this 2-week period. And then we're going to move on to other things. And it was like nothing. It was like, washing dishes or cleaning dust off of a counter. It's going to happen. When are we going to prioritize it? But it's going to happen. And I love that. I love that it's just, we know how to do that. We know how to do that. That's not a question. And that there's, it's not even a pride thing. It's just, no, we've cracked potty training. And it seems foreign, and when you're in it, that 2-week time period, it feels like it's going to be the end of your world, but it's actually the beginning of your life. And it's such a huge leap in hope when that happens. So do listen to your experts. Do get help and support so that you can toe the line during that 2 weeks so that it can happen. But did you see the look of pride on Jack Riley's face when he did it, and there was the yay and all of that? We got so ingrained in saying yay when there was when potty happened in the toilet that everybody likes to tell the story of when my husband and I came to card for a clinic, and the clinic room was across the hall from the men's bathroom. And at one point, it was a long 2-hour meeting every other week. And at one point, my husband excused himself and went across the hall to the men's room and didn't realize how echoey it was and how sound traveled so much from the men's room. So we were sitting in the clinic room, and my husband was by himself in the bathroom, and he was so ingrained in, somebody pees in the toilet. Because we did it with mom and dad too, to model that, like, mom and dad pee in the toilet too, and we all go yay, and that's a good thing, and it's a party. So my husband was in the men's room, and all of a sudden we heard him go yay because he was using the toilet. And of course we still laugh about that. I'm sure my husband doesn't appreciate me telling that story over and over and over, but it's important that for that period of time, obviously we don't still do that. Neither my husband and I do that, and my son, he would think that we were ridiculous if we were to do that when he goes into the bathroom, right? It's that differential reinforcement. We moved on to other things, but there was a period of time where that was our lives, when every time somebody urinated in the toilet, there was a party. Really super important. I need to check the time to see. 10:41. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly, before we call Bonnie Yates, talk about briefly, because I don't want to cry about it again, about going to the dentist yesterday. So we went to a new dentist for the first time, and it had been too long since my son had been to the dentist. I'm going to say that. And there now becomes this thing with different circumstances about, do we disclose or do we not disclose? And the current directive from my son is that we don't disclose unless there's a private discussion beforehand about it, and we only disclose if there's a real necessity. And I have to be honest, going to the dentist, I did not think that there was a need to disclose, right? So anyway, they wanted to take him in. He's so tall now. He's over 6 feet tall. And they took him in to do the x-rays by himself. And my husband and I were both there, and they were kind of looking at us like, why are both mom and dad here to bring him to the dentist? And I wanted to go in for the x-rays, and the x-ray tech was like, no, we don't allow that. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna, let him do the x-rays on his own. And which was weird for me. And I gotta say, it's weird for me. All the other there was like a mom that was there with a bunch of kids, and little kids, not on the spectrum, of course. And she was just letting them walk off with total strangers to go into a room and get their teeth cleaned. And I was like, I don't know what that life is, right? But anyway, I said we wanted to be there when he got the exam and to be there for the discussion and so on and so forth. So. And I will say this, the woman who was his dentist, I don't know what her accent was, but English was clearly not her first language. And let me say this, whatever her first language is, she speaks English better than any other language I speak, right? So I have nothing but respect when people can learn a second language to a degree where they can communicate, right? But I will say this, that when it's my child's health, I need to understand what you're saying, and I have a right to understand what you're saying. And if English is your second language and you have a thick accent, you should not get defensive, is all I'm going to say when somebody is asking a question about their healthcare or their child's healthcare. Well, she got defensive, and she didn't like me off the jump because I was asking a lot of questions and not understanding what she was saying. So there was that. And then there was the whole, thing about, she wanted to know if I was the grandma or the mom. And right, so that didn't help situation at all, right? She and I were not off on a good foot, and my husband had filled out the paperwork and she didn't like the way he filled it out. And there was a whole question about, are they on any medicines, prescriptions, or herbs, is what it said on the questionnaire. And I had said to my husband, herbs. I was like, well, I think if they put herbs on there, you should list supplements. So he listed supplements, and she was like, what does that mean? And I said, that means like vitamin D and CalMag zinc. And she was like, vitamin D, why are you giving that to him? And I said, because it's good for him. And she was like, well, who said that? Right? So we were off and running, not on a good footing, right? But then she looked in my son's mouth. My son opened up his mouth, and she looked in his mouth, and she immediately backed up and said, she was like, "Oh, something went horribly wrong. Something went wrong developmentally with this child." Looking at his teeth in front of him, and she's like yelling this in the room, and she was like, something went wrong developmentally, and she was trying to tell me that he'd gotten too much fluoride, and we don't do the fluoride thing, and so then she said, well, no, he must have had a really high fever. And of course he did. He had a really high fever, and that was when we saw the regression into autism. He was hospitalized. But she was standing there yelling it and saying that something developmentally had gone wrong. My son laughed at the whole thing. I was paralyzed, horrified, terrified, overwhelmed. They did the teeth cleaning and we left, and she found a cavity, and I said, we're not doing it here. I was so upset, you guys. And I thought, maybe that all wouldn't have happened if I had disclosed. I don't know, but it was really upsetting. I really want to encourage you, call ahead to the dentist. Don't go through what I went through. All right, we got to go. We're gonna take a break, and we're gonna get Bonnie Yates on the phone so that she can answer your questions. So stick with us.
Our twins, Justin and Jessica, were premature babies, so we always were very conscientious of their development. But I think it was probably 15 months, Justin started getting really obsessive compulsive with opening and closing doors. And Justin started tantruming a lot too.
Get out! I will!
These would be major tantrums that were just completely debilitating to the family.
Having to take him out of the house, put him in the car, drive around, just to calm him down.
I remember a breaking point and just thinking, you know what, we got to do something. This is not right. Once we were on the track to getting a diagnosis for autism, we started sharing that with our close friends and family. It just so happens that somebody from our older daughter's private school called us out of the blue. She introduced herself and she says, I know that recovery is possible. Those words so early in our journey were a guiding force for us. As we got more educated in knowing what is effective therapies for kids with autism, we realized quality ABA is vital to that progress. That's where we decided that CARD was the right provider for us and for our son. Justin responded very well to therapy. The behaviors were tracked, and we saw that what was being instituted was working.
Justin, what are you doing? I'm coloring.
You are coloring. Good for you.
There was real progress, and it was progress that was tangible.
I just remember when he made a sentence, he said a sentence. We were just happy about it, going, no way, I can't believe you just did that.
What's the date?
The 18th.
18th of what month?
December.
Oh, what year is it?
2007.
Oh, okay, so how old are you today then?
5.
The therapies that CARD did for Justin didn't just impact his daily living skills, but it was a positive impact on our entire family.
I'm Justin. I am in 4th grade. I like playing video games sometimes. My dream to build a teleporting machine. Like sometimes if like we're on an airplane and it's like really long, you guys just say, oh, hurry up with that teleporting machine. We're waiting on you. And I just started Friday Night Lights. This is our 3rd game of the season, and it's pretty fun. You have to be fast.
We attribute so much of Justin's recovery to CARD. Their goal was the same as our goal. We wanted Justin recovered. June 12, 2008 is a day that I celebrate every year because that is the day that Justin was deemed recovered from autism. And Dr. Doreen Grandpichet met with us, looked at him and just said, he's brilliant. You need to keep his mind stimulated because he's very smart and he has no residual traits of autism.
Welcome everybody to our 5K, 10K run and family festival.
So the Act Today for Military Families Run and Festival is a race that benefits military children with autism. So we help a lot of the families around the country whose parents serve in the military.
I'm an autism mom, but also a military wife, and I'm so excited to be here at Act Today's 6th annual run. I've never missed one. It's something that really helps this situation. Is fabulous because there's no other organization like it.
San Diego has some of the highest concentration of military in the country, if not the world, and a lot of my friends are military and are affected by autism disorder. And so for me to do some little thing to the people that protect our freedoms is important.
It's hard enough to parent a kiddo with autism. Can you imagine parenting a child when you move on average every 2 years, you have a parent member deployed or
I have so much respect for, and we're so thrilled that we're able to do this segment with her on a weekly basis. Bonnie, we want to talk specifically about the law firm that you are with right now. Do you want to give them the name of the law firm, since I slaughter?
Sure, we can do the name. We can do the name, and if you want, we could also do the disclaimer.
We do need.
Get it all
Yeah,
out of the way?
let's get it all out of the way.
Okay. I'm getting really fast at this.
Oh,
Okay,
you know what? Hang on one second, Bonnie. We have to take a quick break because we lost our picture of you and we want to get it back up. So we're going to take a quick break and we're going to be right back with Bonnie Yates.
I'll stay right here.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hello, fellow activists. In our last segment, we talked about step number 2, educate yourself. Step number 3 is get support. Now, any journey can feel overwhelming if you feel like you're walking it alone. Well, you're far from alone, because with 1 in 50 kids diagnosed with autism today, there are a lot of us out there. Of course, there's always the issue of financial support. Now, there's a handful of organizations out there that offer financial support to families in need. Act Today, or Autism Care and Treatment Today, is one of them. Visit our website at www.act-today.org to find out more about our grant process. I want to talk about a different kind of support today, emotional support. Now, you can get that from other travelers on this path. Some of the best advice I've ever received is from the moms of other kids with autism who went to school with Wyatt or were involved with programs with him. Then there are the pioneers. These are the families that have gone through this years ago, and there was very little information out there. All of these people seem to have the desire to pay it forward. Now, one of them, Lisa Ackerman, who is one of my mentors, started an organization called TACA, Talk About Curing Autism. She actually took the concept of mentors and support groups and made it available to everybody. You can go to their website, talkaboutcuringautism.org, to find out more. During the first and most difficult year after Wyatt's diagnosis, I wrote an email to close family and friends, letting them know what was going on and the challenges our family was facing, and why we dropped out of sight. I was amazed at the outpouring of love and affection and all the help I received from that email. First, you have to be vulnerable. You can't be afraid to ask. Try this out. Could you cook me a meal? Are you going to the market? Can you pick me up a few things? Could your kids play with my kid and make them feel included? Or can you come over and clean my house? Well, maybe not that last one, except with your best friend. And maybe the best support of all is having someone that listens, and that doesn't cost a dime. So until next time, surround yourself with the loving kindness of others and keep the faith.
Welcome back to Autism Live, and there we have Bonnie Yates. We can see her now. We weren't able to see her before. Thrilled to have her back with us. Bonnie is a special education attorney and someone, as I was saying before, that I have so much respect for. She's just one of those good people on the face of the earth that does so much for so many people. Thrilled to have her here. And Bonnie, tell us the name of the law firm that you're with.
Okay, so the name of the law firm is Hirji, Hirji, and Chow, LLP, and we're in Culver City, and our phone number is 310-391-0330.
Fabulous. And before we get started, there's a disclaimer, because this is a segment where we're going to talk about legal things, and there's a disclaimer that's important. I'm going to let you share the disclaimer.
Okay, we're getting really good at doing the disclaimer fast. So here's the disclaimer. I'm licensed to practice in the state of California and also in the federal courts, and that's where my training is. So any legal advice we give you is either per California law or federal law, and we try to remind people that their individual states will have laws that may be different, and if they're in a different country, then of course the laws will be different. And then the other thing about this is we're trying to answer questions of general interest, and they aren't necessarily specifically tailored to your individual case. So if you have a serious legal concern, you need to get specific advice from an attorney who's versed in the law and versed in your facts.
There we go. And but having said that, we so appreciate you, and people are loving this segment, Bonnie.
I'm so happy.
Oh,
It's been very educational for me. As you guys know, I'm not, high tech, and I'm learning how to work with this little, eye that I'm supposed to stare out when I'm really talking to you, which would be, much nicer. So since you're putting up with that, and I appreciate that, I think today we've got some really good stuff for you.
we do. I'm going to jump in with
week-
one question, if that's okay.
Of course.
Okay,
Yes, please.
so the first question is, what are the rules about where a school can offer me FAPE? I put my son in private school because the only program they had that was right for my son would have had him on a bus for an hour each way. That is valuable time when he could be learning. An hour on a bus and he will show up at school completely checked out. 3 exclamation points. Now we are paying a fortune for him in private school, and I don't know how much longer I can do it. Worse, I think about all the families that don't have the option of sending their kids to a private school, and so their kids get stuck on buses. There ought to be a law against that if there isn't already, and he or she says we live in New York.
Right. So this was a really good set of questions from the audience because they allowed me to go and learn about something that I've never really touched on before. It's kind of a two-part question. I'm going to answer the first part. The second part maybe you want to deal with in a separate show later on down the line. So question one is, when does an unreasonably long commute on district transportation constitute a denial of a free appropriate public education, constitute denial of a FAPE? And then the second question, which the reader doesn't really ask, is there any remedy for me to get reimbursed for my private school tuition? And so the separate analysis would be later on down the line. How do you privately place a kid if you want to sue the district for reimbursement? So I'm talking to you about transportation, and you'll see I've got notes that I'm reading from, and that's just me letting you know that this was really as instructive for me as I think it will be for you. So basically, if you have an unreasonably long commute on a public bus, let's say, to get to your special education class, that can be a denial of FAPE. But in looking at the cases that I found and some things from the Office of Civil Rights, an administrative law judge is going to be inclined to not grant that, not make that determination unless you've got really egregious medical facts. So this consumer or this family was in New York. And so I found some cases for New York law, and then I found some from other jurisdictions, and then I found some from California. So let's start with a definition of what transportation is under IDEA, because I found it to be much broader than I had, really ever thought about. So one thing it can be is it's transportation to and from school, and it can also be around school, within a school, and it can also be specialized equipment that allows you to get around. So if you need a lift to get onto the bus or a special seat belt or something like that, that all falls under the purview of transportation for IDEA purposes. People are interested in wondering whether or not they can limit the commute. Is there any kind of bright line test under state or federal law that's going to say 60 minutes is per se unreasonable? And the answer to that is not at all. It's really left up entirely to the individual states. There's nothing in federal law. And it's going to be based on an analysis of the specific facts and then the specific unique needs of the person using public transportation. So, for example, you could have a problem with the drive distance. That's what the New York family had. You could have a problem with the amount of mileage reimbursement you're given for transporting your own child, which sometimes happens. You could have a dispute about pickup and drop-off locations. You could have an issue about how many times a year the district will pay for your family to visit your child in residential placement. So these things, along with stuff like bus driver qualifications and the fitness of the school bus, the age of the school bus, and whether or not the district's conduct was negligent, if there's a bus accident or something, that's going to be left up to the administrative law judge under state law. So there was a New York case, and unfortunately, fortunately, I guess it played out like this. The New York school district had a kid on an IEP that said he was going to be the last on the bus and the first off the bus. So hopefully that makes sense to you. That was an accommodation intended to deal with the fact that he had multiple disabilities. He's a Down syndrome child with intellectual disability and a heart condition. And so it was thought that it was very difficult for him to make this 1 hour commute, 1 hour each way, right? This is New York law. So the school district then ran into a problem because another kid needed to be the first off, last on. And so without really doing much of anything, they just notified the first family and said, well, we're changing your bus route, and that increased his transportation time. So this became, it became a question of whether or not this was a denial of faith. And so basically the family filed a multi-issue due process hearing request, and one of the issues was the commute too long given the circumstances. And what the hearing officer found in that case was that the change had been made by the district without getting any information from a district medical doctor about the safety of it, and that was basically violative of stay put. And so on appeal, the last on, first off designation stayed in the student's IEP. So that's a New York decision. It doesn't talk about necessarily the exact same facts as your Card New York family had, but it does show you kind of what they look at. Now, for the New York kid, there wasn't even that big of a difference in terms of the commute time. It was 25 minutes if he was last on, first off, and 34 minutes if he was not. But because of the procedural failure on the part of the district, and this is the significant part, the district didn't do it right. The district should have not just made this arbitrary decision the district should have gotten a medical clearance if they were going to change the IEP, and since they didn't do that, it stood. So there's some interesting language in the case. It says basically, it talks about what kind of factors to consider, and it's going to be a balancing test between sort of the student's needs and the district's needs. Now, I looked at another case that was from California, from Hemet, California, and this one should have gone for the family, but it didn't. And again, it was a procedural problem. The student was 3 years old and had severe reflux. The family lived in a rural area, and so when they would drive anywhere, which wasn't as often probably as if they didn't have a disabled kid with this problem, they would stop all the time and make sure the child wasn't choking because the child had severe reflux. And so the district commute on the bus was 40 minutes, and it was an hour and 10 minutes in the bus each way for the child. And so the problem was that the district was never informed by the family at the IEP meeting that the reflux was a problem and a shorter commute was necessary. And so for that reason, even though the hearing officer strongly hinted that if the IEP team had been informed about the choking, they would have found differently. Because the family didn't give notice, it was found not to be a denial of faith. So there's some language in that decision to the effect that IDEA under federal law doesn't specifically answer these questions about how long is too long, and that the IEP team should always consider the length of the trip in light of the student's medical, emotional, behavioral needs. So you can see what you need to do if you've got a transportation problem, and you can bring it up to your IEP team, and you need medical evidence from a doctor or behavioral evidence from a behaviorist or whatever it would be. If you had ADHD, it just causes you to decompensate. There would be different facts that would militate in favor of a shorter bus ride. You are going to have to be very thorough and specific and present credible evidence to the IEP team about the problem with the trip. So now, in terms of our New York families' due process challenge, as I said, it's going to be on a case by case basis, and the administrative law judge may be more sympathetic if you can present facts such as in one case where the policy was knocked out because the result was that all the special ed kids were getting to school late and having to leave early. So that constituted kind of systemic faith denial because they were being treated less fairly, shall we say, than the general ed kids. There was a case from the District of Columbia, 2004. A vision impaired kid was spending 2 hours on a bus ride to an NPS, and this was alleged to be a denial of faith. However, this was something the parent had agreed to in a settlement agreement. And so, in essence, the short version of what happened was the administrative law judge kind of punted and said, well, you should have dealt with this at the time that you entered into the settlement. It's not a denial of faith. And then another case from Oceanside School District involving a 45-minute car trip. If you put the kid in a taxi or mom drove him, this is a child with autism, but on the bus it was 1.5 hours each way. And so in that case, actually I'm getting my facts confused. The District of Columbia case was the 2-hour ride to the NPS, which was no denial of faith because the family didn't inform the district of the child's particular health problems. And then the Oceanside case from 2012, 1.5 hours each way did not constitute a denial of faith because the parent should have negotiated for it in the settlement agreement. So I went into some detail here
which I
because
appreciate.
I wanted you to see that the cases tend to go against the parent unless there's really compelling medical reasons. Now, Shannon, tell me how much time I have left. I want to make sure I leave time for the other question.
Well, and I was just going to say to you that we're running out of time, and rather than squeeze the other question in, what I'd prefer to do, if it's okay with you, is save that question for next week. Would you be?
That's fine, and I apologize for going over.
No.
Let me just.
Yes, go ahead.
Do I have like 1 more minute? I can summarize.
Absolutely.
Okay,
yes.
thank you. Okay, so for the New York family, there would very much be a possibility of having an IEP and raising the fact that you were chased out of the district as a denial of faith. Problem, New York family, is you did things in the wrong order. I don't know what happened at your IEP meeting, but I'm presuming that you left the district before bringing these issues to an IEP team. There would still be a way to address this. You'd sort of be starting all over, and we'd have to talk specifically about how you would do it. But you're telling us that your child cannot hack it for an hour on a bus and that it interferes with his ability to get an education. And that's the kind of thing that's very ripe for an IEP team discussion.
Okay. So what I'm walking away from this, and believe me, I love all the detail that you're going into, Bonnie, because it really gives us an understanding of where the court, how the courts look at this, that we need to be clear in our IEPs. If it's brought up where they're going to be busing our children long distances, we need to be clear and be prepared to talk about how that medically will impact our children from the first time that it gets brought up. And it also seems to me that we need to get some legislation proposed that prevents our kids from being, for somebody to propose for any child to be on public transportation for an hour and a half each way, and a child with special needs, that's something that I, as a mom and an advocate, want to get some laws on the books that prevent that, because that's crazy town. But if that's the law, and if there's nothing in the law that prevents that, then we need to be prepared to deal with it in the other ways. But I would like to, I would love to save this other question for next week, and I would love to just refer to, we had a question yesterday that came in about an IEP, and I want to tell the viewer who wrote in about the IEP, about wanting to know that there was something in the IEP meeting that they agreed on the IEP, but there was something forgotten, that I spoke with Bonnie about it briefly, and we need to know, it really matters what the thing is that was forgotten. So if you can write back in and make it clear to us what the thing was that you want in the IEP, then we'll pose that question to Bonnie next week. How's that for a deal on both ends? Are you good with that, Bonnie?
It's a good deal if you give me one more, if you allow me
Yes.
one more sentence.
Go right ahead.
Okay, it's a great deal. Okay, so here's the issue with transportation. You have to show, it doesn't have to be medical, it's medical, emotional, or behavioral.
Okay.
You know, and what I want to say, this is kind of my political comment, is I've always felt that the attitude about transportation for special ed kids was, they're special ed kids, we just have to keep them occupied anyway. So if they're just sitting on a bus for 4 hours a day, well, that's, 2 hours fewer that we have to fill in. So I agree, it's really unconscionable for any child, much less a child with a disability who has to, work so much harder to get anything done.
Yeah, so we'll have to look at what we can propose to turn that around and get something on the books that says, get a precedent or a law on the books that says you can't do that. It's not good practice. So we got to close that loophole up. But Bonnie, you're amazing. You're fantastic. We appreciate you so much. Say again the name of the law firm and how they can get a hold of you.
Sure. The name of the law firm is Hirji & Chow, HIRJI&CHAULLP. Our phone number is 310-391-0330. And I'm loving the questions, so, keep making me work hard.
Okay, and thank you so much. You are working hard, and we appreciate it, and we appreciate you so much. But we'll be in touch, and definitely we'll address that second question next week because it was a goodie. All right, thank you, Bonnie. Thank you so much.
Everyone.
You too. Bye-bye. We are horribly short on time. I'm going to ask Samantha, we're not going to go to the A word, but we're going to show just a short clip. I got to hang up the phone here. Before we come back, while we get Alex Plank on the phone, because we want to talk with him about the new mission statement for Autism Speaks. Are you good with that, Samantha? Does that work for you? Okay, so short break, and then we'll be back with Alex Plank. Stick with us. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're at the ABCs and XYZs of Special Needs Conference. And this year, for the first time, they've got something really remarkable. It's the Entrepreneurial Boutique. These are all items that have been made and are being sold by individuals who have special needs. So we're going to do a little shopping and talk to some of these fabulous entrepreneurs. Come on.
My name is Molly Rarick, and I'm founder of Breed's Gift. We're a nonprofit that serves teens and adults with special needs like Chase here. We were founded in 2013 and serve people in the Conejo Valley, Santa Barbara, and LA.
Our main objective is to give our participants the skills they need to gain a more independent life.
My name is Shelley Cox, and Lisa Zalagi and I are founders of Creative Steps and Create Micro Business Enterprises. And the items that we're selling here today are all made by the clients who have passions about what they want to make, and then they get the profits from what they make after we've paid all of the other expenses.
We are here today because my goal is to be independent, and also I would like to share all my artwork, and I would like to sell.
Thinking about at his young age being a businessman, it's amazing. I cannot be more proud.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We have joining us on the phone and via Skype right now, Alex Plank. He is a regular here on the show with us. We're always thrilled to have him back with us. Alex is the mastermind behind the creation of one of the most incredible sites that there is for autism on the internet. It is wrongplanet.net. And Alex is often the person that I run to when I need some help getting my brain adjusted around some things that happen. And I called Alex to have this conversation because, as we spoke a little bit about on the show yesterday, Autism Speaks has changed its mission statement. And of course, Autism Speaks is an organization that has a lot of controversy swirling around it, but they changed their mission statement, took some words out, added some different words, and I wanted to get Alex's opinion. I think, first of all, welcome, Alex. Always thrilled to have you here, and always thrilled to have your point of view on things.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It's always a thrill. And I expressed to you this morning that I don't know quite what to feel, because I'm in that gray area where I have a 13-year-old son who is perfect in my eyes, and I wouldn't change a thing about him. And while there are things about him that are frustrating for him sometimes, and there are things about him that are frustrating for other people sometimes,
right.
He's perfect, and I wouldn't change a hair on his head. And I adore him exactly the way he is. And I'm getting my head more around being a parent of an adult who's on the autism spectrum. And I want to be I want to be politically correct. And I don't ever want to say things that offend all the amazing adults that we have that are on the autism spectrum. But often I get, I stick my foot in my mouth, and I want to be educated about these things. But I got to be honest, Alex, that this, I've had a little bit of grief over this change in the Autism Speaks language. So why don't we back up and talk about the new mission statement? Let me just briefly say that the new mission statement is Autism Speaks is dedicated to promoting solutions across the spectrum and throughout the lifespan for the needs of the individuals with autism and their families through advocacy and support, increasing understanding and acceptance of autism spectrum disorder, and advancing research into causes and better interventions for autism spectrum disorder and related conditions. Autism Speaks enhances lives today and is accelerating a spectrum of solutions for tomorrow. Okay, so that sounds pretty good to me, right? How do you feel about the new mission statement?
Well, I think that's a great first step. I've been trying to get them to change a lot of things for a while, and work with them, and unfortunately, an organization as big as Autism Speaks seems kind of hard to change. But the fact that they are putting this mission statement out there that no longer uses, framing it in, the idea that it's an epidemic and a crisis, is certainly great for people like me who feel stigma
And that's really, it's important for us to talk about because, one of our theme this week is talking about the phrase that is widely used and accepted, nothing about us without us. And that is so important. So, when their old mission statement used words in it like cure, it used words like hardship, crisis, words of that nature, challenging. Tell us what that made you feel as a person who, with an autism spectrum diagnosis, what did it make you feel?
Well, first of all, I think what people need to realize is not only did they frame it as a, quote, hardship, but they framed, certainly I've faced hardships in my life, but the thing that they were saying was the hardship was the autism itself, not the issues that people on the spectrum face. And a lot of the issues that we face are because of the lack of support and the lack of resources to be able to thrive. So many adults are unemployed, have trouble in getting jobs, have trouble keeping jobs because there is an awareness out there that shows what they can do, and also there aren't programs that can benefit not only autistic individuals but the companies they work for. I mean, there are plenty of examples of companies creating programs now to hire autistic individuals, and not only is it great for autistic people, but it helps the company's bottom line. So this is not just a charity thing where they're trying to help autistics. It's something that actually improves their company, because autistic people do have a lot of traits and a lot of assets that companies can tap into and become more profitable by taking advantage of.
Absolutely.
But by framing something as a global health crisis, an epidemic, using terms that are what we use to describe things like Ebola, it certainly doesn't people like me and anyone really feel accepted or feel like they're going to be able to get a job or do something.
And that's the part that I want to focus on. I think as a person and for our community, I want to focus on that when you heard those words, that it made you feel not accepted, because for you personally, there is no, the autism starts here and ends here. You are a whole person, and stop me if I'm getting any of this wrong. And autism is as integral a part of you as anything, correct?
Well, sure, but it's not just about how I feel. It's about how other people perceive individuals on the spectrum. There's a lot of discrimination against individuals on the spectrum because of the fact that this is seen as, and there's a lot of people that are, instead of treating us with respect and just treating us like normal human beings that we are, they treat us with pity, and there's this sense of othering that comes from the fact that we're being seen as a global health crisis.
And the reason why I keep asking this is because, and you and I have already spoken about this, and one of the things that, there are many things that I love about you, Alex, but one of the things that I love and appreciate the most is that I can come to you and I can tell you where I am as a parent. And there are many times when you and I don't agree. We have not agreed on the air many times, and we've not agreed on social media from time to time, but I love the fact that you're willing to discuss it with me and that you don't just dismiss my side of it. And I hope that I never just dismiss your side of it, because I'm always so interested in your opinion. But I cannot help but go back and journey back to when my son was, before he was 2 years old, and I had this child who was himself, and he spoke and he made eye contact. And he interacted with us in a way that was uniquely his, but it was very distinct in terms of the fact that he spoke and he made eye contact. And then over a period of months, something happened, and that child went away. And what I was left with was a child who was nonverbal and who didn't make eye contact. And I still don't understand it. I still to this day don't understand exactly what happened, and there's no doctor who can tell me exactly what happened. But, you know, months later, what we arrived at was that this was autism. And so, yes, go ahead. You wanted to add something?
Can I just address that? I mean,
Yeah.
so here's why I think what I'm saying is so important. By framing autism as a epidemic that we need to wipe out, that would mean that the organization is focusing on research that doesn't help him, and it won't help him because by the time that research has any sort of benefit, he's going to be much older, and what he needs is support. And as you mentioned to me earlier, he is a kid that did get a lot of support, and that's why he's so successful as he is today. But what we need is to focus on dealing with those supports now. So by framing autism as this, crisis, this epidemic, it takes away from the fact that that he needs support now. It focuses on trying to eradicate it. It's like if someone in a wheelchair lived in an environment where there were no curb cuts, there was no way to get anywhere. Back in the day, that was actually a reality. So people who were in wheelchairs were unable to go down the street because there was no curb cut. And I kind of equate it like, instead of actually just making the curb cut, everyone was like, well, we need to just focus all the money on research to, make it so they don't need wheelchairs anymore. When instead they could have easily fixed the problem, which was not actually the problem with the individual themselves, but the problem of access. So I think, and also you mentioned eye contact, which I think is interesting because, in reality, eye contact for autistic people doesn't serve much purpose. We don't need to make eye contact. The reason we do make eye contact or learn to make eye contact is to be accessible to neurotypical, to require. So it's actually kind of like we're making concessions to neurotypical people, whereas they could also be making concessions not to worry about the eye contact.
Yeah.
And because in reality, eye contact is not necessary if you really think about it.
No, and I this is why I struggle though, Alex, because and you and I spoke about this earlier, that now when my son is at the age of 13 and I know him to be who he is, and there are things that are uniquely him that I think are gifts that he has a way of looking at things that I know or at least I feel very strongly come from having autism, that he looks at things and it's a gift to us. So I am able to see the blessings. And I said to you, if somebody walked up and said, we can take away the autism completely right now, right here, and it's safe, at this age, at this time in his life, I would not allow someone to do that because I would be afraid that I would lose my child's personality, and I want him exactly as he is. But when he was 3 and he wasn't able to speak, if somebody had offered that to me, or somebody had said, we can make it so that this doesn't happen to your child, and that he won't go through all these difficulties that he's going to go through for the next few years, I would have chosen that. I absolutely would have. And I know that there are many parents who are out there with children who are nonverbal, have not yet been able to be potty trained, and the children are unhappy, they're hitting themselves, and I know that they are not yet at the place where, because they don't have the benefit of the point of view, and they don't have the benefit of having had the support and services that I have had,
right?
So that they're not seeing it as a blessing yet.
Well, I think that's part of the problem and part of the reason that messaging is so important. When parents hear about autism, before they research it, they hear words like crisis and epidemic. And what message does that send to parents?
But I think we're already there, Alex. I like, nobody had to tell me I was in crisis when my child was 3. I knew it. I knew that we were in, as my husband called it, a poop storm, but he didn't use the word poop. Because I was being hit and I was being bit. I had bite marks all up and down my arms, and my child would run out into the street. I mean, we were in a crisis in that moment. But but is it when parents talk about that, is it that also makes you feel like we're stigmatizing you?
I mean, if you're just telling me what your kid is doing, I don't see that specifically. I mean, but saying it's a crisis, the autism is not an epidemic, you know, like it's not. So like, why would you want to add to parents already? Clearly, you know, you were, you know, things you were going through were very hard for you to deal with. If you also are hearing constant messaging on the media that it's an epidemic and a crisis, that only adds to your fears and doesn't help you in any constructive way. And it's also just not accurate because it's not an epidemic.
I agree with you. I think that people misuse the word epidemic, but do you agree that more children are being diagnosed with autism than ever before?
Yeah, that's a fact. I mean, there's no.
Well, not everybody agrees with that, though, Alex. There are people who say, well, maybe I should clarify. There are people who say, yeah, maybe more kids are being diagnosed, but there aren't more kids with autism than there were 20 years ago. There's just more kids being diagnosed.
I think that is something that seems to be pretty clear. I think that, you know, autism has always been here. Steve Silverman's book, Neurotribes, goes through the history of it and the fact that these kids have always been here and that they just weren't getting services and were being institutionalized and not getting the support they needed.
But so you agree then, you just think that more kids are being diagnosed, that there aren't more of them than there were at one time?
Well, I mean, there's more people in the world.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think
percentage-wise,
there's a rise in the percentage. Yeah, exactly. I don't think there's a rise in the percentage of people who are autistic.
Okay. I have to say that I disagree, and maybe that's where part of the problem is that I do think that there are more instances, and it's a spectrum. I think that.
Well, I mean, you don't have any, but the problem is that the reason you think that is because there's more people being diagnosed, and there's awareness. I mean, if you go back in time, the kids that you would have thought about were being sent off to institutions when they were very little and weren't being talked about, and the parents were pretending, you know, that a lot of parents felt so much shame that they pretended that the kid didn't exist. So, I mean, how would you know that there were?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with part of that statement. I agree that there have always been people on the autism spectrum that weren't being diagnosed. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that many of them, I think about
it's just that we have studies that have looked into cultures and looked into countries where autism is not treated and not diagnosed, and we've found that the diagnosis rate there is virtually non-existent. And if you ask the parent there, autism was a common thing, everyone would say no.
Yeah.
And yet the studies that we found where we actually go into these countries, I believe South Korea was one. Dr. Grinker, who's an anthropologist at GW, did a study there and found that the rate is actually just as high as everywhere else. It's just that people don't realize it exists because there wasn't as much of a recognition. So the idea that it's increasing in actuality, I think, is something that most studies out there have not found to be the case.
Well, I'm a former teacher, and I can remember being a high school student, and the guy who was the valedictorian of my high school graduation class, I have no doubt whatsoever that he was your textbook Asperger diagnosis. I don't think he ever got that diagnosis, but looking back, he, absolutely brilliant. I think he started out 2 years behind me in school, but graduated with my class, and at the same time was getting I think a bachelor's degree from one or more colleges in that same time that he was getting his high school diploma. Brilliant.
Sure.
And I believe that he has 2 PhDs now. But socially, like he, really, really, I can remember sitting in a Spanish class with him, and somebody was saying to him, at the time in Spain, a movie ticket, the first 2 rows you could buy, and it was cheaper than any row behind. And she said to him, the teacher said to him, why would that be? And he said, that makes no sense whatsoever. You want to be closer to the screen, not further away from the screen. And she said, well, no, stop and think about it logically. And then she explained to him that in a movie theater, you'd have to look up and that it would hurt your neck. And he rejected it, and because he had these very black and white rules about what he knew about going to the theater. So I have no doubt whatsoever. But when I think about everybody, because
I don't think, honestly, though. I mean, I think maybe a teacher, it might hurt a teacher's neck who's much significantly older, but a high schooler's neck's probably not going to hurt looking at a screen.
But she was asking him to look at. She was asking him to look at why Spain would have made those tickets cheaper. And he was giving a lot of the same logic that you're giving. And she was saying, but think about it from a social perspective. And he, I totally got it. And he didn't. And I remember thinking, I know he is so much smarter than me. Why is he not understanding why society does this? Even if logically it doesn't make sense. Why did society say that the tickets, because the fact was that the tickets in the first row were cheaper. And so she was trying to get him to see why society made that rule. But I'm just using that as an instance.
I would assume, though, that it was based on demand, which is economics, and not really based on, you know what I mean? Like, most people don't want to sit in the front row.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
So to fill those seats, they make them cheaper to actually fill them.
Right.
But I don't know. I don't know if that's an autism thing.
But
necessarily, but I see what you mean.
But understanding why don't people want to sit in the front seat was.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, for sure.
Was the issue. So in any case.
Right. So okay.
You see what I'm saying? So in any case, but as I think about everybody else I went to high school with, and obviously if there were kids who were nonverbal, then they would have been in another school. So maybe some, maybe some people.
Maybe not in school at all. Maybe
exactly.
in an institution. That's the problem.
Exactly.
So that's why I think that when people say, when I was a kid, I never saw these kids that were autistic, is obviously it's, an epidemic and it's increasing.
But when I think about my son's school now and how many kids in his school district, and those kids are not, if we were to take every single kid who's in my son's school district who has an autism spectrum diagnosis, and if we mentally said, okay, 30 years ago, these kids would have been in an institution, we can't find those institutions. So where were those kids? There was one institution, but maybe it had 40 kids where there's 300 and some odd kids. So where were the rest of those kids? This is why we can't.
What do you mean? What do you mean we can't find those institutions?
It wasn't like there was an institution on every street corner. We can look and see where there were institutions and what the population in them was, and we can add all those up. It doesn't equal the same number of kids.
I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Well, I mean, there's been people who.
There's significantly less institutions now.
Right.
There were a lot more.
Right.
So,
but even if you took all the ones that there were and took and assumed that the population was 100% autism, which we know it wasn't,
right.
But even if we said, for the sake of argument, let's take all the numbers of all the people who were in institutions during a 10-year period and added that together, and let's look at how many people in the United States, kids, have a diagnosis, we would see that and we would factor in that a certain percentage were that very high functioning, like the gentleman who was the valedictorian in my class, we still wouldn't arrive at the same numbers. And so my question is, where were those kids? And it may be that they were kept at home and that we didn't see them, but it's still, you can see why people have questions, is all I'm saying.
Right, but as I said, there's been studies that show that, I mean, where were those kids in South Korea?
Yeah.
They were somewhere because they were there.
Right.
So, I mean, the idea that that the United States is somehow exempt from that is
I think that
doesn't make sense to me.
I partially agree with you, Alex. I think that there were a lot more cases than we knew about. I just don't think it comes anywhere close to what we have now, is my personal take on it. But that could be one of the things that we disagree on.
I mean, I guess we should disagree on that because, and certainly, there's studies that showed in other countries where people assume that there weren't really any cases. That was not the case either. So, to think that, that would be wrong, to me, just it doesn't really make sense.
Well, and as I think about it, we digress away from our topic, which is talking about the fact
also,
that
I'll add one more thing.
Yeah.
Just before we go, which is that Connor took pride in the fact that he would turn away tons of cases of autism. People would be coming from all over, and he prided himself in the fact that it was this rare condition. So you have the preeminent expert in the United States on autism who is telling people that it's this rare thing, and he's actually operating on the assumption that it's rare and turning people away from his clinic. So
and bragging
there is
about how
evidence
many.
that those people were. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, he bragged about the fact that it's this rare form of schizophrenia. So
Yeah, well, I'm not a fan of his, so
I mean, I
is
don't.
anybody, right?
So that's another reason. So you have professionals, and including the preeminent expert who prides himself on being the preeminent expert on autism, saying that it's very rare. So obviously you're going to have them diagnosing the kids with other things.
Well, as I always say, Alex, I think it's so important. I do subscribe to the nothing about us without us. I do think it's important, and I do try to touch base with you and so many of my other friends who are adults on the spectrum to do a reality check to see where I am, because it is never my intent. There's been so much discussion in this last week about ableism. And I shared last week that I think that, quite honestly, I think unintentionally, I often suffer from not taking other people's perspective as fully as I want to. And I think it's something that we should all be aware of and think about. How are we ableists, and when are we ableists?
And I think a lot of, and I'd love to talk about ableism if we have time, because I think that's certainly an important issue here.
Yes, go for it.
Well, first of all, I think that there's a few different types of ableism. First of all, you have this unfortunate trend of a lot of news organizations writing stories about autistic people and not interviewing a single autistic person. You have this thing that people call, quote, inspiration porn, which is where they find, where there's a news story about an autistic person doing something extraordinary, which if their autism wasn't in the story, it would not be newsworthy. So it's like, oh, well, this guy became valedictorian in his high school class, or homecoming king or something.
Yeah.
Let's say he became homecoming king, and the only reason CNN writes about that is because he's autistic. I'm sure, I don't know if that's actually a thing that happened, but there's plenty of actual news cases,
right,
like the story of the ball player who sat with the kid who was at lunch,
right,
and sitting alone. I don't know if you recall this, but there was a kid sitting alone at lunch, and
yes,
all the news story praised this ball player for doing something that shouldn't have needed to be necessary, and the only reason it was newsworthy is because he was autistic.
Yeah. Well, can I tell you that we did cover that on this program, and we talked about how important it is for role models, and that how important it is for everyone to have friends. And one of the things that we said was we look forward to a day when a story like this doesn't need to be covered because it's already happening, and that it's no big news. But we did cover it,
I think
Alex.
the issue, I think the issue, however, isn't the fact that the story was covered. I think it should have been covered, but the story should have been the fact that the school was not providing the level of inclusion that they needed to be, and that it shouldn't have happened. And yet, instead, this story was spun as this inspirational story of a ball player helping out a kid who's autistic. Then that's the issue. It's the issue that people on the spectrum were not interviewed about the story. It was just that. And there was also recently a story where I read in the UK where this waitress was commended for being a hero because she was nice to a family with an autistic kid. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of waitresses might be rude when you have an autistic kid who's being loud and some might say, quote, disruptive. But she was just doing her job, and she even was quoted saying that. And yet, the story made it seem like it was this superheroic thing for her to do when everyone should act like her.
You know what I've been thinking a lot about, Alex? You and I went to a really amazing performance a little over a month ago. We went to see a comedy group, Asperger's Are Us. And we had a really good time, and they were hilarious. They were so much fun.
Yeah.
And in the interview, there was a talk back afterwards, and somebody asked the question, what do you guys think of the Big Bang Theory? And I found the answer very enlightening, that wasn't their favorite thing. Let's put that mildly. But what one of the gentlemen said was, if you think about it in a way, the progression of acceptance is first that, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but first you're mocked, and then you're in mainstream media, and then you get to acceptance. And he used the example of gay rights and said, if you think about it, how many gay characters were there ever on television? And then it got to Will and Grace, where it was this very stereotypical depiction. And then, we're at the point where marriage is legal throughout the country. And he said, so in a way, this kind of sucks, but I guess we're on the progression to acceptance. And I hadn't really thought of it that way before. And that keeps turning over in my head.
Sure.
But it is always interesting to hear from the point of view of somebody who's seeing it differently, though, who's seeing it from more up close and personal.
Well, I mean, it's funny that you say someone who's seeing it differently.
Then
it's the people who are actually, it's like the people who are actually being represented are the ones who are seeing it. So in reality, everyone else is kind of seeing it differently than they should be.
Right. Well, I mean, isn't that what all perspective taking is? And this is one of the things, though, where I always get, it's a sticky wicket for me, because I believe that the autism community encompasses parents as well. And I think that you and I disagree on that, correct?
No, the autism community encompasses, everyone.
But you and I have had conversations before that I have said, I don't have a 3-year-old who isn't verbal anymore, but there was a period of time in which I did. And so when my son was 3 and could not speak, I was his voice by proxy. So for me, the nothing about us without us included me at that point, because he didn't have a voice. But do we disagree about that? I think we do.
I mean,
right?
I don't think the reason that he didn't have a voice was really the autism. It was the fact that he was 3 years old. I mean, 3-year-olds aren't very introspective.
But he didn't have the ability to ask for services for himself, because he was 3.
Any 3-year-old really would.
Because he was 3, but also because he had autism. I know 3-year-olds who would walk up and say, I need whatever, and say what they need. I need you to be my friend. I need you to come with me. I need you to get me help, for instance, where my 3-year-old couldn't do that.
Right. Although, he probably was attempting to do that. He had a voice, it just wasn't being heard. That's the issue.
See, it's all a matter of perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, no, that's my point. Like, I understand. Like, I don't have any problem with. I think that you have this misconception that I have an issue with parents being advocates for their children. I think that all parents should be advocates for their children.
No, I know you
disability or
champion us
not,
to do that.
and I certainly think that you're a great advocate for your kid.
Thank you. I try.
At the same time, though, I don't think that parents should be the only people that are being listened to, and that's unfortunately currently the climate in the media. A lot of times we're not heard, and
I hope
parents are interviewed. It's a common problem in disability journalism where a lot of disabilities people who actually are going through it are not interviewed about the issue, and the reporters don't cover it. So
well, that's why I called you this morning.
I mean, it's kind of like and it's like when people say all lives matter, kind of. It's like, well, obviously, that's true, but we're talking about an issue here.
Right.
That we're not being heard, and that's the issue. Like, parents are being heard. There's plenty of advocacy groups out there that are run by parents that are being listened to. There's plenty of news articles that interview parents from their perspective, but there is a lack of autistic representation in the media, and that needs to change.
Well, and that's why
talk about the fact that of course, obviously, I would think that your perspective matters, but your perspective isn't the one that's currently being marginalized, really.
Well, and that's why I called you this morning.
I mean?
I could have called a dozen parents to talk about how they felt about the Autism Speaks mission changing, but I called you.
No, and that's why I really appreciate you're always very inclusive and get the perspectives of people on the spectrum. So you're not the problem.
Well, I don't know that I'm not the problem, and sometimes I get told that I'm the problem, and I think it's important that we're all always asking. This is hard. This is really, really hard. And I think it's hard for everyone because honestly, as I say to you, and I said it 8 times already, I don't ever want to offend. But if I don't know what offends, and if I don't get it, and if I don't ask questions, how will I ever know? And if I don't listen to what comes back, how will I ever know?
But let me ask you this. Like,
Yeah.
Have any of your perspectives changed after having this conversation?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I know that you came into it thinking, oh, well, this is a bad thing, like that there might be removing these terms, maybe it takes away from the issues, but after hearing my perspective, does it change?
Let me be clear, because some of that was our conversation before, and I don't want to leave that out of it, that I was saying to Alex before that there is a part of me that grieves for all the parents that are in those early stages, that the fact that we've taken out words like challenge and hardship and crisis. I had said to Alex, I was in crisis when my son was diagnosed. I feel like to take those words out, I'm glad that it's championing, other things, but I don't want to make it sound like it's all hearts and flowers and roses and that this isn't a hard journey for anyone. So that's, I said I was grieving a little bit that some of those words were taken out because sand is shifting and I don't know where it's going. So let me say this. I do feel better having had this conversation, Alex. I do. I feel like, and first of all, rereading the mission statement reminded me that they are still looking at causation, and that's really important to me. I do want to know why at some point, and I feel like we all need to know why at some point. And so they haven't said that they're going to stop looking at causation, so that makes me feel better. And I feel better in terms of, well, I'll tell you, one of the things that occurred to me while we were having this conversation was that I need to get more individuals who are on the spectrum on the show more often. That was one of the things that I got from this conversation.
I'd be happy to do the Skype thing if it works for you.
I had said that to you when we went to the Asperger's or Us. This is available to us, and you can do the Skype thing, and we're happy to have you on the show whenever you have availability. Because this totally works for me. But I also need to get more people that are on the spectrum on the show talking about these kinds of things so that we all get our heads expanded and that we don't get none of us needs to get comfortable, is what I walked away from this conversation with. That I sort of want the cheap way out, which is I want for you to just give me a bunch of words that I can use and a bunch of words that I can't use so that I don't make you feel bad, right? But that's the cheap way out. What the more expensive way is that I really need to be able to sharpen my perspective taking skills, put myself minute by minute in other people's shoes, not just yours, but other people's shoes, and try to understand. And that's hard. It's really hard. But that's what I want to do as a parent because I want to understand my son. I want to understand the challenges that he does face, and I want to celebrate him and who he is. That
Right.
I was not in that space in the first 3 years after he was diagnosed. And I think it's unrealistic to expect every parent to be able to get there in the first 3 years.
And I totally agree that, that's an issue because, I think that is an issue of the way that society views disability, and that's obviously not something that can change overnight, but the only way to change it is to remove the stigmatizing language, to remove this view of autism as being a crisis.
I want to go one further, though.
So you don't feel like you're in a crisis, because
there are people who
if
are
you
watching.
had more support and
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But there are people who are watching who didn't get the support that I got, though, Alex. And
that's my point. Yeah, that's my point. I think that's the issue here. I think that is why we don't want to focus on acting like, oh, well, let's just call this a global health crisis and try to raise money for science that doesn't help anyone today, and there's no money for services and actually provide those services. So there isn't this idea that
can we
autism
say
is this negative thing,
Can we say, though, that there is a global health crisis in terms of getting enough support to people?
I would say there's definitely a global crisis in terms of not supporting people who need it.
Okay.
That's definitely a crisis,
Now,
and I don't know any autistic that would disagree with that.
Okay, so that's the common ground, and that's where we can move
I
from.
think that's the issue that we all want what's best for everyone. It's just that I don't think people really realize that how powerful language is and how powerful representation in the media is in terms of acceptance and what we need to do. I
agree. Alex, this has been so educational and really wonderful. And it's also going to make me look at, I think I am very guilty of the inspiration porn, and I don't think that I'm unconvinced of that yet. You're going to have to work on me more, because I say to people that hope is everything, and that with hope we can do anything, and that some days all you need is hope. And I don't want to be disrespectful in giving hope to parents, but I don't want to stop giving hope to parents. And sometimes that inspiration porn is what we need to get through.
Right, but when something sort of invalidates the problems there are by focusing on the wrong thing, like, as I mentioned, instead of focusing on the problems that, this kid faced in terms of not sitting alone at lunch, it's not inspirational that a football player was being a nice guy. What should be inspirational is, stories of autistics doing great things, not just because they're autistic, but because they're doing great things. And that's certainly inspiration. There's plenty of examples of autistics out there who have done many great things. And that's not inspiration porn. That's just reporting on people who have accomplished great things. But by focusing on the fact that they're autistic and that they were homecoming king because people in the school felt pity for the kid and wanted to make him feel happy is actually really detrimental.
Okay. All right. I'm going to take that under advisement. Yeah. I'm going to swirl that around in my head a little bit. Alex, thank you so much. I know you got a movie to go to, and that maybe next week we can talk to you about what you think of the movie.
I'd love to talk about that.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. And we want to remind people that they can go to wrongplanet.net and check out so many different things that you have there, including videos, but so much to talk about on wrongplanet.net.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Welcome back to Autism Live. We're here at the end of the show, at the end of the week, and we've talked a great deal about possibilities, what's possible, but it's time to take a little mindfulness moment. This is something that we like to do on Thursdays, is just focus how we can be more mindful, because I don't know about you, but stress, right? I said earlier today, I'm overwhelmed, there's so much going on, right? And when we take a minute to be mindful, what we do is kind of reset everything. Reset the stress, reset our bodies, reset our minds, reset our breathing, and put things, you know, it's like the train that's like slowly going off the tracks, and we just reset everything back on the track, and we can chug along. So really quick, because sometimes we just don't have to. I always pictured mindfulness as meditation and people sitting for hours on end in the full lotus position. There's a Freudian slip for it. A full lotus position, and you know, meditating for hours, and I would have been asleep, right? If I meditate for more than 15 minutes, that's it. So I'm always looking for the mindfulness things that you can do on the run, that you can do anywhere, that you can do quickly to get that reset. So one of my favorite things that I've been using in the last 6 months is the idea of answering the question, what's happening right now? What's happening right now? It's like a game show. Dun, 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 dun. What's happening right now? Because so often we live in the present, only a finite amount of time, right? We're either thinking about something that's about to happen, or we're living something that did happen. And so much of the trauma that we're carrying around has something to do with the future or something to do with the past. And we get into that fear of, oh, well, this happened in the past. What if this happens again? So instead, to be thinking to yourself, what's happening right now? And here's the asterisk trick about this, is that if you have the time to ask what's happening right now, it's never something that's horrible, right? When people are in the middle of a crisis, they don't have to ask what's happening right now because they're reacting, right? If you've ever been in a car accident, right? You react in the moment, and then it's afterwards that you go, and then you relive all of it, right? But it's not happening right now. When you're thinking through all of it. So whenever you find yourself in that overwhelmed, if you just take, I'm always about the 3 breaths, but this is even just 1 breath, and ask yourself, what's happening right now? Is there anything bad happening right now? And usually, if you've got time to ask the question, the answer is no. And it reminds you, oh, I'm here right now, and everything right now, maybe everything isn't perfect, but nothing horrible is happening in this very moment. Then if you need to, you can do some of the other things that we've talked about where, you think to yourself, okay, where are my hands? What can my hands feel? My hands are on the glass, and the glass is cold. And what can I feel? I can feel the air conditioner blowing on my neck. And what can I see? And go through your different senses, right? The 5 senses. But often, if you feel yourself starting to, be in that stressful, and you say to yourself, what's happening right now? Oh, I have a really good friend who gets really caught up in a movie and has a really hard time snapping out of it. And I remember one time having to go someplace with her, and you could just tell that she was just in this mode, right? And I said to her, what's going on right now? And she kind of looked at me, and she said, oh, okay, all right. And I said, no, what was it? What just happened? And she had been watching the movie Norma Ray. And when she, and we had to go to leave someplace, so she had paused it in this place in the movie, and we'd been outside. And when I said to her, what is this? What is going on right now? And she said, oh, I was standing on a table striking in a factory. Because mentally, she was still at that place in the movie, and had the sign up, and was, right there with Sally Field, and being like, strike, strike, strike. And physically, you could see it on her that that's exactly where she was mentally. She was in a factory calling for a strike. And sometimes you and I are in the equivalent of that, where, I could be someplace and be at a fever pitch because in my mind, I'm at an IEP meeting, but I'm not. I'm right here, and I'm not in an IEP meeting, and my kid is okay, right? So you just ask yourself, what's happening right now. And sometimes it's just enough to pull you out of wherever you were. And then you can laugh about it and go, oh, I'm not striking in a factory. I'm right here. And right here is okay. In any case, so that's our mindfulness moment. We are officially out of time. What a great show that we had. So thrilled to have had Bonnie Yates and to have wonderful Card Telehealth. And of course, Alex Plank in his wonderful wisdom from wrongplanet.net. Want to remind you guys, big weekend this weekend. We are going to Denim and Diamonds on Sunday. It is our hope, keep your fingers crossed, it is our big hope that we will be coming to you live on Facebook Live from the red carpet. Let's, that's if we can get a signal out. If you don't see us, it's because we couldn't work it out. But in that case, we'll record everything to show you at a later date. But tune in to Facebook on Sunday night and see if we're there going live. Fingers crossed, because I would love to have you guys see the interviews as they happen, because there's something about it live that's really, really fun. But in any case, whether you get to see us Sunday night or not, keep your fingers crossed that a whole lot of people come with big checkbooks and credit cards, because it is a wonderful opportunity to raise money for grants for so many people all around the country, for services and support, all those things that we were talking about earlier. Thrilled and can't wait for next week. Next week, hold on to your hats, because it is our big Halloween episode on Wednesday. And, we've gone through some changes. You guys made some recommendations. You'll have to tune in on Wednesday to see who Nancy and I are showing up as. And we'll have some Halloween tips for you as well as some great, great guests. And in particular, next Thursday, we're going to be talking about suicide prevention. So make sure that you tune in for that. All right, my friends, until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.